Self-improvement style advice is often a bunch of useless platitudes and nonsense, peddled by people who just want money. And it's even worse online, with clickbait listicles, and the YouTube video version of clickbait listicles. Or at least that was certainly my experience when Googling how to be funny, or how to get funnier. Either you get weird, sociopathic, woo-woo pickup artist.
What's up? This is Will Powers from Evolution of Man, and what I want to talk to you about today is high-status humor, or what I like to call prize frame humor.
Trick people into liking you, or trick women into thinking you're funny so they'll sleep with you stuff.
How you feeling, Pinnacle Person? So in this video, you're gonna learn exactly a couple ways how to make a girl roll over with laughter and basically make her laugh all the way to your bed.
Or really, really basic structural advice on comedy. Yes and, rule of threes. Or, put down your phone, be yourself, which isn't helpful. There's a lot I want to talk about in this video, but in the interest of differentiating myself from clickbait or stringing viewers along before I get to my central thesis, the central theory I've concocted on the fastest way to be funny, the fastest and most direct way to get funnier, I'm just gonna say it outright right now. The fastest way to get funnier is to put yourself in a position where being funny is rewarded and not being funny is punished. A lot of resources for being funnier, especially specific resources for improv or telling jokes in conversation or for stand-up comedy, look at comedy like a math problem, where you take an established rule or format and slot your own experiences or observations into that formula. Of course, if you're trying to be funny, it helps to learn the established mechanics of comedy. Especially with specific comedic art forms or formats, you should bare minimum have an understanding of what people before you figured out, the same way any narrative filmmaker should at least know what shot reverse shot and the 180-degree rule are, even if they choose not to adhere to them. This approach is certainly helpful as a foundation, but in my experience, you should look at comedy the same way you would look at learning a complicated language, or a series of different, though interconnected, complicated languages whose communicability and success are very subjective and dependent on audience, rather than as a checklist or a chart or a math problem, or as some objective puzzle you solve and then become the crown king of subversion. I don't speak French, and yeah, I learned some French through Duolingo or French classes at a college or online, but if I wanted to be fluent, the quickest shortcut is to go to a country where people speak French and force myself to speak to people, and to learn the language to get around and function, and try to interact with a society that is fluent in this language, and deal with my own failures in learning it as they exist as a barrier in interaction, which is perhaps a more intense motivator than a bad grade or a green cartoon owl. To me, that's the difference between having an encyclopedic knowledge of joke formats and memorizing every Carlin or whoever bit, and writing all your jokes in a vacuum with just you yourself, or you and all the people who already like you and will only ever laugh and support you, versus actually going out and performing stand-up night after night to a bar full of apathetic drunks, and feeling intensely which jokes work and which jokes bomb, and then obsessively tweaking them night after night, and hanging around other stand-up comics, who are sometimes vicious and bitter people who are very withholding of laughter and validation, and trying to get along with them and fit in. Try being unfunny in that environment and see how it makes you feel. I think my answer to the question of how to be funny is a very ugly and unpleasant answer. It might not be good for you as a human being. It might not develop healthy interpersonal traits, and in fact it can do the opposite. Like with a lot of other art and performance, you might sacrifice other aspects of yourself for it. It's not healthy to invest your self-worth in the approval of an audience or of your peers, especially approval based on laughter response. But that's the shortcut. And as far as I can tell, every funny person I've ever known has experienced some form of it. I made fun of the self-help and creepy pickup artist aspects of being funny, but there's a lot of truth to the concept of learning to be funny out of desperation and lack of an alternative, as a way to be liked, whether by people you're attracted to or by people generally, as a way to get attention and validation you don't get elsewhere, and as a way to avoid violence, making fun of yourself before someone else can as a defense mechanism, or using humor defensively in an aggressive way, or to disarm a threat, break tension, or de-escalate an intense situation. You also don't have to be funny to be liked. There are so many other things that are more valuable in a person than being funny. Kindness and empathy and openness and flexibility and vulnerability that can sometimes be lacking in super funny people. Humor can be a shortcut to being liked and accepted. And I've known people who are really funny and fun to be around and riff with, but who aren't the best people. Improv is collaborative, filmmaking is collaborative. Any kind of collaborative art is maybe going to be harder to be successful at if you're a total antisocial jerk to people. But stand-up is a very solitary art, and there's so little incentive for someone who is funny and who is good at it to also be a nice, empathetic person. I'm not saying someone is a good or better person because they do improv versus stand-up. That's absurd. And I have so many friends I love and respect who I met when they were doing stand-up, and some of them still do it. And while I have a tremendous amount of respect for accomplished improv comedians, I actually prefer to watch stand-up and prefer it as an art form, in part because bad stand-up as a singular 5 minutes at a time on an open mic art form is tolerable, but bad failed improv, because of the more vulnerable and sincere and supportive collaborative nature of it, is so bad. It's like the worst thing in the world to watch. I cringe so hard and feel so bad for people and don't enjoy it. Whereas with like open mic stand-up, it's like, okay, in 3 minutes this will turn over to the next person. A lot of current edgier comedians and older, you can't joke about anything anymore, dinosaur comedians put too much value on being funny as the pinnacle of human cultural achievement or something, in a really egomaniacal way to shield themselves from criticism or introspection or evolution, as if being funny is both static and important above all else. Such a noble and subversive cause to tell hack rape jokes at an open mic. You know, the content of the joke, the impact of the joke, what telling the joke is doing to the comic. Whatever you are sacrificing in yourself or in others to get there. Not just in offensive jokes, but the strain of really personal or self-deprecating jokes. Not that they're all straining, but like the potential strain. That doesn't matter. All that matters to these people is being funny. And they have their way to be funny. This masculine, mean, unempathetic, aggressive style focused on domination and resistant to shifting cultural mores. And that's what's funny. For one, if you're really the funniest person in the world, pretending humor is some kind of measurable, objective quotient, it's not an audience's fault if they don't think you're funny, especially if your material panders to people of your own belief set and alienates everyone else. If you think a cliched, hacky, shallow, pro-feminism joke, or Cheeto-in-Chief anti-Trump joke is virtue signaling and bad comedy and the death of comedy, but you get on stage and tell a "there's too many genders now" joke and think that's brave and funny for no other reason than because it reaffirms your beliefs and upsets people you disagree with, and when it bombs, you lean into it and say people who criticize you are too sensitive, then you're deluded, on top of being unfunny and having bad opinions. And two, there being a time and a place for everything, and always trying to have room for context and for empathy, is such a foundational, basic social etiquette. One time several years ago, I was hanging out with some people who had just lost a relative in a car accident. We were at a party playing apples to apples, and one of the cards I got dealt was a car crash. I'm 100% a morbid sicko who finds jokes about grief and death funny, and in another game, I'm sure I could have found a good use for that card. But in that moment, I felt dread about the possibility of even accidentally playing it. Not only were the people I was playing with not sickos like me, they took the game very literally and probably wouldn't have found that card funny anyway. But even if the card combination would have made me laugh, or made other people around laugh, whatever I would have gotten out of that would not have been worth upsetting people who just lost someone. But by the rule of like, putting being funny first. I should have shown those cucks and made my car accident joke and called them babies who don't appreciate the nuanced fine art of comedy if they look put off or upset by me being massively disrespectful. I was never like an online bigot or harasser. I never told anyone to kill themselves or anything horrible like that. And I talked about this a lot already in my political correctness video. If you want to see how I feel more specifically about edgy comedy, this video isn't really, I talk about edgy comedy in this video, but that's not really what it's about. But that video is definitely about that, so link in the description. This is kind of a companion video to that one. But I spent my late teens and early 20s glued to a computer, posting on 4chan and edgy forums, and then spent my mid-20s hanging out with stand-up comics around Atlanta. And I definitely did get funnier and a lot better at a specific brand of very cutting, very mean humor. And that helped my acceptance in those communities, especially the online ones, more so the online ones. If you're unfunny in an environment where all people really care about is who is funny and dominating each other or dominating outsiders in that very, especially mid to late 2000s, masculine online humor way, then you're worthless to that environment's value system. And nobody wants to feel worthless. Then I got older and I realized that being funny at the expense of other people who don't deserve it, or even separate from edgy or politically incorrect humor, seeing being funny as a competition, as if laughs and approval are a limited resource and you have to immediately humiliate and just gut someone if they vie for that resource, or having friendships where you get that high from riffing with someone, where you make each other laugh and you can kind of indulge in being a little meaner until you realize what you were indulging in sometimes went too far and was not healthy. I had learned a lot about how to be funny that I kind of had to forget, and I let go of unhealthy relationships where humor was the only real foundation. Like, I had to learn that lesson multiple times over years of my life. And at this point, while I find that style of dominance-oriented humor too mean for me to use all the time, while I'm occasionally tempted to indulge in it or do laugh at it when other people use it, I certainly still appreciate irreverent humor when it's not targeted at marginalized people. It's inflexible, and it is not appropriate for every situation that calls for humor in the first place. It's certainly not useful for general interactions with other human beings who aren't stand-up comics or irony-poisoned internet freaks. I didn't write this because I think I'm the funniest person ever, or an expert on being personally funny. I wrote it because I want to be funnier, and I have struggled with being self-conscious about whether I'm as funny as other people I work with, on podcasts or live shows at conventions, and I spent a period of time neurotically obsessing over it. I've been doing way more comedy-focused work, or work where I need to be funny to keep up with everyone else. And at some point, suddenly, in those situations, after 5 years of being Shannon Strucci, video essayist, it didn't matter at all if I could write and edit a compelling video essay, because now I'm trying to establish myself in a very different field. Like, who cares? And I'm working regularly with people who have done stand-up for a decade, or who have written professionally for TV, or whatever, and I know they're funny. It's not a question to me if we're talking about them. And I was forced to get outside of my comfort zone and work through some insecurities that I would never had to have dealt with if I had stayed just a video essayist. Comedy helps in making video essays and making them engaging, and I've tried to incorporate it into my work. And I am proud of some of the visual gags and editing gags I've come up with, but being okay at editing gags doesn't suddenly make me a comedian. We've had a lot of really cool and really funny guests on Critical Bits, the podcast that I'm on, but by far the time I was most intimidated and felt the most pushed to be better was when we had Mark Meir on. Meir is probably best known for his voice work, but he's an incredible stage performer and improviser, and tabletop role player. And he was just so funny in a way that was so quick and weird and creative.
You did more? Don't hog it all, you swine.
And he just threw himself into voices and bits that I either would have been too self-conscious and hesitant to do, or not able to do in the first place.
I am adult human like you.
That explains.
When he says that, his skin ripples.
Why, yes, normal Earth human. Of course.
Yes, the best kind. Normal Earth human.
Either limited in my voice acting ability, or in not, at this point, being capable of thinking that quickly.
Okay, well, so long, kids.
I
Thanks
guess,
a lot.
Oh, can we like get your like cell phone number or something?
It's 3. Okay, see ya.
And we recorded that episode in person too, so here's this super funny man with years of improv experience who's been doing voice acting for like 20 years, just killing it, sitting right in front of me. And I'm trying to play off of that and trying to keep up. And I didn't bomb, I think I did well.
As we're walking, I'm also talking. So, you look like you've been having some fun. Tell me, what have you been up to,
Oh, I'm sorry. I have no idea who you are, and I start running away.
Oh, yes, well, I've seen better days, as you can probably tell. Sheriff Raoul Duke, you don't remember?
Nope. And how far am I? Like?
But it still energized me to want to be better. On top of always wanting to be better when my co-hosts are so funny. When you work with people who are good at what they do, you want to honor that and at least keep up with them. So I'm a lot better about it now and more comfortable, but especially in 2019, I got very in my own head about trying to be funnier and be funny without indulging in being mean. And at the same time, I got a couple of very flattering curious cats asking about being funnier. Like this one, referencing Critical Bits. I'll link the full answer in the description. There's more comedy advice for me and my friends that I don't go into in this video, which maybe I'll talk about in a future video. I don't know. More sort of structural advice and advice for stuff to check out. But the question was, how does one improve at the improvised banter you and the crew have on the bits? Would improv classes be worth it if you've ever taken them? And here's part of my answer that I basically based this essay on. The most direct answer that I could come up with, and it sounds kind of harsh or like sociopathic or something, is that if you spend time in an environment that rewards you for being funny and punishes you for not being funny, you get way funnier way faster. This isn't necessarily a good thing, and those environments aren't always creatively or emotionally supportive or nurturing. But that's kind of the shortcut, like going to another country when studying a language to force yourself to learn to speak it. When we were all talking about this, Joel said, "Tell them to just get funny friends, then you'll all want to out-riff each other and we'll never have a real conversation again." And that is honestly what it's like when you hang out with comics. Or in my case, comics or edgy internet forums circa 2008. And that is kind of the language everyone speaks in, and if you can't keep up, you get left behind in the conversation. Again, this kind of environment can be very unhealthy. I have quit being friends with a lot of the funniest people I know because they were also mean/selfish people who use laughter as validation. And be around funny people isn't really viable advice. But you could try going to stand-up or improv shows and try doing stand-up, even if you don't take classes. I think my answer for myself is, especially since the idea of just doing straight improv or taking improv classes or doing stand-up are all not anything I am remotely interested in just because of my own disposition, I'm just going to have to endure that vulnerability of learning how to be funnier without relying on bad habits as I go. And as I get better, on mic, on the internet, recorded forever, working to keep up with people with years more experience than me, and always reading and watching and listening to and playing funny media as inspiration. But I'm glad I'm at least pushing myself and learning more. And it's not that I'm unfunny or that I think I'm unfunny. Fans do think I'm funny on the show, and I know in conversation or on panels I can make people laugh. It's not that I suck at comedy. It's more that it's been a while since I challenged myself with anything creative in this way. I learned how to draw as a child. I learned how to edit as a teenager. I've enjoyed writing all my life. I've gotten paid to do all three a bunch of times. I'm not saying I'm the best at them. I just mean I'm not self-conscious about them at all. Like, I know that I can edit. I've been editing for 15 years. I've been drawing for like 25 years since I was a small child. I haven't been podcasting for 25 years. And I've never done stand-up or improv or any serious comedy writing. So what hubris to just like assume I'd be as good at comedy, at being funny, as people with years of experience in those, when I've been spending years making video essays about auteur theory and reviewing Korean webcomics. Doc Hammer, one of the showrunners of the Venture Brothers and an accomplished oil painter, said this once about his paintings. "Painting is showing up and dealing with sucking. People will get on me and tell me that I need to relax and take it easy, that I'm not really that bad. What they are missing is the arrogance of what I am saying. The fact that I know I suck proves that I know I am better than this, which is a very arrogant thing to do, so people should not be concerned with my self-esteem. When I say I suck, it actually means that this is not a representation of my ability. I know that inside me is better. Dealing with my sucking and proudly saying this sucks is how I get up and do it again. I can't let that thing get out there. I have to apologize for it with my next piece." And that's me with like failed jokes that I make. Anyone trying to get funnier in other mediums has to keep risking sucking and being vulnerable in that way to hopefully get better and get funnier, the same way stand-up comics and improvisers do on stage. But I also want to do it without being cruel and without relying too much on laughs for validation or my own self-image, which are both traps that are easy to fall into and excused and encouraged in a lot of comedy environments. I also should say, again, since I make fun of it so much in this essay, that I don't hate stand-up. I love stand-up. It's not for me personally to perform it, but I have so much respect for people who work so hard at it and are good at it and who transform the medium in such cool ways, in ways I never would have considered. And I didn't want this essay to be like Shannon Strucci's manifesto against stand-up comedy, or to be perceived as some kind of reaction against bad personal experiences that I had. On my top films of the decade video, a couple of people suggested Nanette to me. I've seen Nanette and I did not like it. I actually had a line about not liking Nanette in that video that I cut. The more I linger on it, the more I think I kind of hated Nanette. I have sympathy for Gatsby and respect for her, but I did not agree with her underlying message at all. And as openly critical of the defensive and often unhealthy culture around stand-up as I am, I could not follow her to the conclusions that she reached, especially knowing so many Atlanta queer comics and black comics and comics with mental illness and female comics and other comics of color or comics from other marginalized groups, or people who are a part of multiple or many marginalized communities, who use comedy to talk about really difficult subjects. rape, racism, disability, and ableism, self-harm, poverty, suicide attempts, in a way that is very meaningful and very funny. I should note too, there's so much variance in comedy, even specifically in stand-up. I'm not saying all cutting comedy is toxic automatically, or any more kind of intense, competitive comedic environment is inherently problematic or anything like that. I'm not like sitting here saying Showtime at the Apollo is inherently problematic and an example of toxic masculinity or anything like that. And I'm not admonishing the concept of roasting people or of roasts generally. It's more what interpersonal issues that I experienced in the Atlanta comedy scene were kind of excused or exacerbated by the comedy culture. Not saying all comedy has to be nice. Although I think that was sort of my point with the video too, that sometimes being nice and being funny are very at odds. And it's been quite an adjustment, I think, for stand-up comics to be doing shows over Zoom calls, and that's been very interesting. I didn't really want to talk about the pandemic earlier on in this essay. I didn't want to date it that much because I want this video to be up in the future. And I do think if you want to get good at stand-up, then you just have to go to open mics. You just have to do it and fail and do it and fail and do it and fail and slowly get better. That's my perception anyway. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you haven't seen my political correctness video, that's, like I said, a good companion piece to this video, and you should definitely check that out. I'll link the Mark Meir Critical Bits episode in the description, but I think the funniest episode that we've done is probably Hoagie Allen, which is the episode Branson Reese guested on.
Today is the day that Hoagie Allen is going to take a man's life from him. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, which is only fair!
Branson is a fantastic comic artist and improv comedian.
I'm Jimmy Buffett!
An actor, and he has his own podcast, Rude Tales of Magic. That's really, really good. It's really funny. And he played a very mean, petty character who wanted to kill one of the main cast, named Hoagie Allen. And I think that's a good intro episode of the show as well, if you've never listened. I mean, there's like spoilers, it's a little bit later on, but I think it's the best out of context episode for our show.
Maybe you should be mad at like the witch.
I'm not mad at the witch, she gave me a superpower!
Oh.
She said, you're gonna have bad luck for the rest of your life unless you learn your lesson about how to treat other people and how to forgive them for stuff. No, that's a superpower! All I have to do is never learn my lesson and I have a power for the rest of my life. Watch this! I'm gonna step out into the street right in front of the car.
Oh, no!
So the semi-truck starts to honk at Hoagie Allen, and he does not move.
I do the triple X, suck it!
It is my favorite episode to link people. If you'd like to support me doing more of this, I have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, and we have merchandise both for Critical Bits and... I had Streetchy Movies merchandise, but nobody bought it, but message me if you want to buy a Streetchy Movies sticker or postcard. I have them. But you can only, on the free big cartel, you can only have 5 products at a time, so now it's all Critical Bits stuff. Thanks!